All right, so I'm going to continue to provide these vlogs, right? Where I provide verbal notes about my adventure. I have a lot of experience that other people can learn from, but there's also a lot that you can learn from me, even if you're not in my skin and you haven't had the same experiences. You can learn, for example, why your culture and why our society is heading to hell in a handbasket when it does knowingly and intentionally ignore people of quality and also by design destroys them while holding up and venerating people that are pieces of crap. You'll notice that this is a regular theme that we come back to. So I want to focus on the most important things, speak a little bit of code because there are people around me, and then go deeper. So it's almost 24 hours since being back, since 10 straight days in Solida. And then it felt like spiritual warfare the last couple of days at the park that I go to on a regular basis, where it's literally Qigong wars between me and couples that just don't want me there. And literally, I'm in situations where I'm in my own bubble. I'm in my own bubble. I'm in my own world. And I'm doing my energy exercises to push them out. But I'm also doing so the whole time, trying not to yell, knowing that that gets me in trouble, but also being conscious that we're after the eclipse of August 12th. And we are experiencing emotional intensity and upheaval in the race to the eclipse. And then it seems like I keep leaving this place when intense things happen here. And certain people, like Chris Roberts, used to have Jeremy Evans, will end up being seen in the hours after I leave. After I declare when I leave, you'll notice negativity comes back. And then notice I come back, they go away. And then also there was someone up that came out drinking, named Kyle, who's friends with Aurora, drinking alcohol, starting fights with people. Yeah, and I wasn't there. You see, so we'll come back to this later as I share my opinions on the real influence that I can bring to a certain area. But it's 24 hours in, and I'm learning from experience each time I do this. And I re strategize how to stay out of drama, but even with people that will be in my inner circle. So a certain somebody will be, saying to me, who cares about the future? Who cares about these gifts? Who cares about psychic powers? And I already know that I'm dealing with a potential argumentative situation that I'm to avoid and walk away from and go, you can win this argument, you can have your opinion, and I'll have my opinion, and that's the end of it. And I'll know right away that I avoided an unnecessary frequency drop because now I know what's going on. After the last couple of days, then after putting out that video at my Substack and on the channel about the pyramid of protection in the Rocky Mountains to push back against the darkness, that's what I'm going to be applying my energy towards. And then I come back and I get my copy of Dion Fortune's book back, Magical Battle of Britain. And then I come back to this park where I had a problem before a couple months ago, and now I've lost my cat. My cat's been gone 3 weeks, but I have recovered from that. My cat probably is okay. And so I'm pretty much just avoiding, not avoiding, but over just going around the popular clique scenes, just like in high school, just like in Portland, just like anywhere else. The politics of everything. And so if they're going to have their own conference that I'm resentful of because I'm not a part of it, called the Crestone Vortex Festival, which just happened on the 12th, which had Jay Weidner involved, which has been on Redis Creations. And so he's a person of controversy. And I talked about it on the blog as to why. I'm not talking about it here. And so if that's the case, then I'm going to say a few things here. So the point here is not all festivals are for me, and that's okay. And I'm just going to get around that. Not everyone's going to understand that. Not everyone's going to believe as the real reasons why it's so controlled. But now that I'm watching, which doesn't even scratch the surface, but now that I'm watching the HBO Love Has Won documentary, of which there's 3 parts, and now that I've seen a few videos on YouTube, and I already was on my channel talking about, quote, the archonic interference, which is a mind control where they pretend to be angels when they are actually masterminds and puppeteers. When you actually see the actual belief systems and many of the just garbly goo things presented by a certain somebody associated with a certain restaurant here in town. then you'll begin to understand what I've been saying for years about people like Ramtha and James Gilliland. I made a podcast 8 years ago called The Network, where it's basically a loose coalition of people or a tight knit of people that are basically putting out the same bullshit. And it could just be there to catapult somebody who's a fascist into power by saying that they are like the return of Jesus, Buddha, some sort of enlightened master. And then they'll just be like a reoccurring theme of the ascended masters, or they call them the galactics, basically giving them the stamp of approval. Whether it be Obama, Barack Obama, or Donald Trump, they're always getting the stamp of approval from the galactics. And so they're influencers. They're influencers towards fascism in a way that low level intelligent people can't trouble think and understand. So you'll deal with places, people, places, and things that have called in the ships, if you will, that have other problems behind the scenes. So it's not really about that specific group, but about what I warned about for 10 years. Lots of different groups at the same time using the internet, pushing certain lies, and then basically people come into line and believe in the same thing. And that's the interesting thing that you need to realize about it, is that there'll be a lot of different groups saying similar things. Different groups, different leaders. Different locations, different states, different cities. You got to ask yourself, where is the variety? Why would a number of self imposed spiritual masters, air quote, be saying the exact same thing? But what happens, unfortunately, the people, they don't go, wait a minute, is it a collective mind control operation using technology and voice to skull and dream invasion influence to implant thoughts, or is it real? And unfortunately, what we'll deal with in a lot of cases are people assuming then that it's real, that it's absolutely authentic, that it's something to be believed because the masses believe it. So I'm just speaking automatically, kind of with the moment in this, post eclipse epiphany. So thus you have the power of influence. But just in general, when it comes to human psychology, and also, in Japan, they have a statement called, you want to be the nail that stands out, you'll be the first one to get hit. And so a lot of people in regular society, they're not going to want to be the person to be that annoying person to rock the boat and be the person who goes, hey, wait a minute. You didn't by chance say when you were doing that group that Hitler was of the light, were you? Or suggesting or trying to implant that seed, probably along with other lies like the earth is flat and whatnot. Because earth is flat and pro-Nazi views, the algorithm always pushed together. So what I'm suggesting to you is this is an environment that is actually very inclusive to people that say that Hitler is of the light. We can see it with Jay Weiner, and unfortunately, we can see it with Aurora. And that's it. At the end of the day, folks, when you have societies like this in 2026 that are totally like open to that like veneration, that becomes the norm. Things are going on behind the scenes. It changes the energy. So I would say that today begins, I don't know how many times I've been doing this for a couple of months, but coming and going, coming and going, coming and going from Salida to Crestone. So here I am, and I'm also trying to get my voice down. Is it obvious? And there's no headset. So I'm trying to keep the voice down. So this is an A and B conversation. So I'm not interfering with their world. So let's move on to the next phase of the conversation. We'll come back to what I was saying earlier with more details somewhere else. Okay. So yeah, I'm going to be doing more more qigong, more meditation, more reading, more writing, more affirmations, more. I'm not going to get in trouble this time. I'm going to be doing some hiking. I'm going to be doing a lot of videos, a lot of podcasts. We have the heat incrementally getting lower, I think, 80 to 85. I think I saw my cat a few times by the river, but I think it just wants to remain free if it is the cat. And then, of course, Salida becomes very intoxicating to me after 7 days because of the energy frequency. Like I said, even if I don't podcast and I just meditate, it's like I'm going into a hornet's nest at Alpine Park by the library, where they want to keep it as it is without somebody coming in with their thoughts, broadcasting their thoughts, essentially, doing their Qigong versus another Qigong. Like I said in an earlier video that was 40 minutes, it's like energy wars. And in that sense, it doesn't sound or feel very spiritual. In that sense, it's, comparable to a workout gym, basically, with a pose down and everything. And the deeper essence of yoga, the spiritual values and the teachings of incarnation, that's what I focus on, not body poses. For myself and discussing the journey of the soul, discussing action and reaction. But I do those exercises. I do circular exercises, as you know, like I am doing right now. I'm going to talk about this briefly, but from the experiences that I had in Dallas and Mesquite, we're doing those exercises actually triggered a police response. Because I'm thinking, I'm dealing with building up, powers, spiritual powers. So I'll go into these dark places like the Mesquite Mall, talk about those topics that we talked about. And it's like I'm walking into like a movie or something, like The Matrix or something. And just by being there where there's all that horrible stuff promoted, you've got to get rid of that one person who's making it difficult for basically, I would actually suggest, or demons or unseen forces that rule that region and specifically that mall. And they basically work through the people in authority to basically ban me for 5 years. And if I go back to the mall, I'm going to jail. I'm telling you, we have entered into the twilight zone where that's normal. I just figured out that's become the name of the game and the way of the future. But we're in a very turbulent time in 2026, moving in 2027 with authoritarianism. Because in this case, with what we're dealing with, there's no guarantee the cuffs are going off in a few years and that things are going back to normal. Like I was saying earlier with these controlled groups, they'll hold up people and say they're ascended masters and look down at the ground and pretend nothing happened once they start being authoritarians and they start locking people up. Because that's the point we got to realize, wait a minute, there are evil spirits working through the popular kids in class, literally, or on YouTube, trying to lead us towards the wrong thing. And so that's what I'm learning from Salida. There's a lot of this, hey, it's a form of spirituality where you can do as thou wilt with what you want, with what the crystal does. And in that sense, it's like a sword then for people that are into dark arts versus light arts. If somebody tells me that you don't have the ability to be a leader, spiritual leader, then that's a challenge to me that I am going to be one. And that's what somebody was saying to me who I live with before I left her, that you'll never amount to anything. You don't have what it takes to be a leader. And I've already demonstrated to people, if they want to read what I write, that I can be a leader when it comes to guiding people to protecting a region from disasters, starting with this one. Because Portland wasn't worthy and Dallas isn't worthy. But this already is a sacred region with a sacred past that is welcoming. The spirits are welcoming to that type of a prayer. But it doesn't mean that, we're going to be able to fix everybody inside this region. Or make them come to a loving state of consciousness where they, want to be nicer to the people. And I believe in being nicer to the people, but my information talking about certain things may not necessarily look or feel nice at first glance, but it is in totality when you understand the intention behind what I'm doing. It's not to cause a riot. It's not to point anybody towards politics. It's actually to pull everybody out of politics on both sides and get them living off the grid without the police, essentially. Inclusive off-grid communities where people are building each other up, not green aliens. That's what I'm looking for. And that's what I'm going to keep looking for. because the alien veneration problem creates a disturbance within each and every community because it creates a hierarchy. And it creates a hierarchy just like the churches that we're supposedly trying to escape from. And that's what it's about. We have micro hierarchy structures and overt ones right here in Crestone. Remember, this is what I'm thinking of. This Crestonian spiritual experience has actually only been around for a couple of decades and is actually in its infancy. And so we can go one or two directions where it goes into the more authentic version, or this becomes Biff's Casino from back to where, and I don't know how far gone Sedona has gone, with the counterfeit love and light, but I want to go down and find out. But what I don't want to go down and find out, is that my dreams won't be realized. I want to go down there and see people challenge me on the things that I'm saying. And if I say that people are hateful, not giving me a chance, then I want people to give me a chance and give me a platform and give me a couple hours to make my case, whatever that case might be with the solar flares. And I'm not going to try to do it here outside of making a few videos at the park. I'm not going to try to be a part of the scene. I'm going to continue for probably the rest of my life operating outside of the scene, creating my own micro scene with a little makeshift table and a lemonade stand outside. And in the end, everybody is attracted to that. I could be giving a talk in Salida and people will be coming over from Pizza Rio to spy on what I'm saying. And I'm not even trying to give them a business card. I'm not even trying to ask them out. I'm actually pretending that they're not even there. And I'm saying the things that need to be said to tourists that are thinking that the only way to connect with nature is your foot in the water, when there's so much more they should be thinking about when they're on that vortex. Because that's a vortex, that's a ley line, that Riverside Park where I march around for days on end. And then this is right here where I am right here, along with other vortexes that are around me. So in that sense, I'm already on board what other people are on board with. What we're not on board with necessarily is what are we doing with that energy. So in that sense, this place has capability for positive secret societies, people that are doing synchronistic Dion Fortune meditations. There are Buddhist temples here. There may be some Sufis there. So there's a karate school, in fact, where females teach martial arts here in this town. That would be because they're tapping into the energies that are here and transmuting it for their own athletic performance. And she probably is very good at what she does. I think that what I was getting really intense on was extreme shouting a couple of weeks ago. So intense that they called the cops on me. So that this time will have to be transmuted to something greater, like doing like heart meditations where you're extending your auric field for as far as possible, then sucking it back in and dropping it down, like you're going incognito into a dark bar or place where you don't want to get attacked, or a mall, or another matrix type of environment. So this place does have a bunch of training potentials and places in which you'll get tested, where you might have people come out of the woodwork that'll drop your frequency, not thinking that people like that would be here, but they are. The negative 44. You have the 44,000 potential, then you have the reverse card, where they actually work to bring us down. People have their stories here, and I appreciate those listening that will tell me their stories later, so we can write the book and warn others and use code names and say, in these spiritual places, they're also game players, and this is the warning signs or the red flags. And I'll be the first to tell you what those red flags are, if I am your first. Someone calling themselves a god or a goddess while avoiding actual spiritual teachings, that's the first one. Ignoring the plight of human trafficking, things of that nature, and real world crimes against women, that's the second major one, red flag that you need to look for. That they're not addressing that, or they're trying to blame one political group. I think I've said enough here. But yeah, it's one of the things that I like to do is to do live streams. Even though I have hardly anybody watching now on this new channel, in certain places where I can tap into the energy that's around me. for inspiration. And then the people watching the live stream will also be receptive to the energy too. So if it's being recorded in a fast food restaurant, which I've done before, that can bring down the message. And I've recorded and done streams in Denny's where the people watching me were like, you're straight up in a demon portal. And weird things will happen if you try to talk deep in places where there's a lot of, a McDonald's, a Burger King, a Denny's, where there's just a lot of like lower energy carnal stuff. Heaven forbid, try to do it in a bar or a strip club. It's actually going to invite a problem. All right, so I'll look for patterns for those Qigong masters, karate masters, or Zen masters that are drawn to the same place. So I think Crestone is great if one can master the ability to isolate themselves from distractions. I'd say that it's a city that's very tolerant. There's some good aspects of it because it's not too nice and generous. To the quote homeless, there aren't too many of us here. Those that are here have learned to adjust with camping, have learned to become self-sufficient. It's like there are certain homeless that will not be drawn here from Salida because they're still in their addiction and they're not going to be able to bring that way of life like it is right out here in town because it's so that's a good thing. I would say that probably I go from one place to another to get fresh air for my consciousness, to influence my thoughts. And what I was saying last night is I literally have to change my environment before I feel better. I can feel like in Salida, like I need to be there for a few days. And then of course it'll be 10 o'clock in the morning yesterday. And I'll get that internal motivation to get up, pack my stuff, and leave. And everything will feel fine once 24 hours come, but it's going to take like a full 24 hours, and then I have to like master the art of walking away from potential arguments or anything that I say that's opinionated is unfortunately going to go in that direction if I'm going to hold my ground. So I, just not going to bring it up then. Or I'm going to stay out of certain places where they just don't want my energy, but I'm going to know what it's about. And it doesn't matter whether they agree with me or not, what it's about. I don't need their coffee. But I'll be honest with you. I wish there was a place here that I can rent for a short period of time to do magical ritual, to connect with the land, because I am trying to activate this earth beam of light, literally. So that's why I think I returned, that I am actually trying to activate real light going up to the heavens that's going to go into the apex of the pyramid. So my intentions are in the right place. And I'm 23 days without a beer. Right? Let me think. What? Yeah, 23 days without beer. That's right. Now, I'll be honest. There's actually somebody who I think is very attractive in town, but that doesn't matter if I can't communicate with her about the sun, and she has literally a shirt that says the sun on her hot body. But if we can't talk about it, then she's just fronting because she's born with the body of a goddess. But and she has a great smile, and she works somewhere here in town. But it is unfortunate to see the prettiest use that for their own agenda, and that's unfortunately the politics of Earth, of physicality. But that does not mean. And don't ever forget, like I'm the person who had the female walk in front of me versus the other way around when I was in Texas. I thought that was awesome. But it clearly backfired because I put her opinions about me and about what I should do in this world in front of me. And I found myself talking to her on the phone for the first time in 3 months since I left. And I was starting to get the runaround that I would have stayed with you forever unless, but it's like, wait a minute. This is not the time to even argue with that person because they're not in their right mind. So I've been getting over losing her and the cat. and then dealing with 5 to 10 police contacts since I came to Colorado. So that's 3 major things. Getting over her, the cat, and minimizing police contacts. And then the Texas police came to my house looking for me 2 weeks ago because of an angry phone call that I made to a mental health hospital where I basically called them human traffickers. And those African immigrants got back at me, called 911, and sent the sheriffs to my house in the days leading up to the recent eclipse. So that's what I'm getting at. And I'm getting ready to launch a new Substack where I'm going to talk about Dallas, Texas. I'll call the Dallas Sun Express because I'm feeling like called in spirit to shine the light on the plight of everybody there. And then I read news that the Dallas Public Library system is laying off 72 workers. She works for the Dallas Library system. Here's what I want to say. This world is so cunning that it keeps trying to make us evil and dark to where we hope somebody gets their karma. And that's really sad and wicked that people could break up without a hug, not be friends anymore, and actually wish harm upon one another because they're no longer friends. And that's the way people are. And that's what has me really sad. You know, because I don't necessarily want her to lose her job, but I want her to know that that was abuse that she put me through. And we're living in a world right now where it could be months later and nobody cares and they don't care and they don't feel the mirror back of the words that they said that attacked somebody who was their best friend. She was my best friend. So you understand when you lose your best friend and they attack you like that, you look at the whole world as having that potential. And if you don't, if you forget that the world has that potential to be that way and to keep venerating people, could be a dude, could be a website, could be somebody listening to Alex Jones, you know, could be a number of people. It could be me looking up to the A man who dated my mother. It's like there are people, places, and things that when we venerate them, we get lifted up and we get dropped like Humpty Dumpty. You know, and unless you know how to put yourself back together again, you won't be put back together again. Okay. So then I can keep talking now about how, like in Salida, they don't help then at the Salida Vista Health Agency or any of that stuff. They'll sit there and they'll make it all about the person, you know, not necessarily wanting to get the help that they, you know, so you basically have to go it alone. The vast majority of the people are drunk and messed up all the time in Salida. So like even if everybody's like homeless in the same room, that's what I'm getting at. If there's somebody who's not at that level, like them in that specific room at the time, like the soup kitchen, for example. I'm trying not to be too loud, so I give people their space. There's one guy on the phone, another guy's taking off. I can tell they're like, oh man. But I'm actually doing this for my mental health. And I'm doing this away from the coffee shop, so I'm not intruding on their space. And I'm doing this away from the campsite, so I'm not intruding on their space, the people up there. This is all I've got, guys. A podcast a day keeps the police away. Meditation. I should come back and do another video. But I'd really want to come back to the park here. Kind of recenter amongst these trees. And let me just try to wrap up my thoughts and just go do something else. So yeah, I've got 6 subscribers now on this new channel. Remember years ago, I topped out with 20,000 subscribers. So we got to a point in our science fiction reality to where it wasn't recommending my channel to the types of people that really needed to hear the content. You know, this shouldn't have to be so hard because I have a lot of speaking ability. And right now it's just kind of going into the void of these 2 videos. And it's not for these people here in this community. It's not for the people in Salida. I'm just here to connect with the energy in the earth, and read my books and have a few. I have had positive connections here. I've had a few positive conversations here, but that's not then meant to lead me into thinking that this is the place, the place, the place, the places. You know what I mean? It's there's a lunar eclipse coming in a couple of days. We're what, like, yeah, 10 more days, there's a lunar eclipse. So we're going from the total solar eclipse of all the intensity that it brought with the lunar eclipse, which might have more of the feminine yin versus yang balance. So that's one of the things that he said in the recent soundbite when I was interviewing him about the solar influence over on the blog, was that the sun is yang, is an action energy, and then yin, feminine, would be like water. Yeah, there's definitely some mystical energy in the air right now. With the total solar eclipse and the lunar eclipse, I can feel it, which is why, silence is good. And I'm actually trying to wrap things up. Silence is good to contemplate, to observe one's thoughts. But for me, it is about observing it and then going deeper into the contemplation and then going into some sort of an action of verbally communicating that truth without being physically violent. So the physical action of talking about metaphysical, mystical, synchronized meditations, just like in the movies like Dark City, to actually do something about the stuff we're not going to talk about now, but the stuff that's manifesting in the news. That's where the pyramid of protection comes in, and the beam of light and energy from this continent to another continent. And I don't know how many people are here that are actually doing that type of mystical white magic. Basically, peaceful warrior, peaceful warlock behaviors of harnessing the power of Mother Nature and then basically sending that power overseas to God's children. Well, it looks like the park's really cleared out since I've arrived. I'm not necessarily assuming that I'm the cause, but they're not necessarily trying to stick around and hear more. But the reason I'm doing this, at least for my own benefit, is so that I can build up my own confidence in my own spiritual forces. Going back to the video that I did a few days ago on YouTube, I'm going into Alpine Park and I'm engaging in a social experiment, and essentially I'm meditating in their space, which is a farmer's market. And I'm noting that in reality, there's a reason why it is that way. And it's always going to remain that way until the people change. Even if somebody meditates and they don't podcast and they're nonviolent and they're peaceful and they're not a criminal, they're still not going to fit in to that particular, culture, unless they pass the authorization, the smell test. So I can be sitting there and I can be doing my meditations, and I'll notice that certain people will be pointing me out to their husband because they'll be basically feeling threatened by me, essentially. The reason that I'm doing these long form YouTube videos right now is so that I can get it out. It's kind of like therapy. It's kind of like counseling, because I don't have anybody to talk to about these things. I don't have even my father to talk to about these things. And I haven't uploaded that conversation with my father, but I am going to do it on Substack. And the dude sounds like he's drunk. So both, I have to deal with the reality of the actual people that brought me into this planet, my mother and my father. Both of them are basically like in a deep state of cognitive dissonance. that their child is hurting, you know, or the idea that they should talk to their son, or the idea that they should care about their son, you know, or the idea that they should thank their son, for not being another piece of crap like a lot of people on this planet. Um, as my mother would say, I'm not feeling called to do that. So, what I'm telling you, I feel like I'm dealing with a world that's not going to get it, but through the experiences that I have, there's a lot more to learn and observe about the human condition. And so even if like the people don't seem to get certain things that I mean, that's really not the point. And I'm gonna have to keep refining my ability at coexisting and survive in a world that's not going to get it. But I certainly am not the only soul that's walked the earth that felt like he or she knew something, who had to put it in a book, that was more understood by the generation that followed them. That is apparently what I think is a key part of the human condition or the human situation, to overcome adversity, to work, towards a greater future for all, basically, even if the people themselves are at war with the message. Like people literally need to be willing to make the sacrifice to live a hard life. Essentially, what we're talking about here in the modern internet, where they can figure out who somebody is if you're on the internet, where your face is a barcode and you're dealing with racism and a Fourth Reich. You got to be willing to be homeless. Have I been willing to be homeless to do what it is that I believe in? Have I been willing to live in my car? Have I gone through things in which, by speaking my mind, I've lost my cat? I've been willing to do certain things, but I don't want to do it forever. If I end up getting out of the situation, and I can end up being, a situation where I end up meeting someone or renting a room or getting an apartment, the amount of work that I'm going to do or plan to do as far as writing is going to go up exponentially. Okay. And I'm going to be continuing to talk about it and talk about if anybody ever receives any aid or is in housing or that type of a thing, especially if they would consider themselves spiritual, is to continue to work for humanity because the work is not over. It's not like you end up like winning the lottery or something. If somebody ends up with some sort of, aid from the government or something, or they end up with housing, it's actually commonly believed that a lot of people will end up like, not living very long or in a state of depression or in a state of addiction if they're just not working. Well, the question is, what are you working for? Who are you working for? Because just working for McDonald's and just working for a restaurant and having all of your money go to your rent is essentially what a slave is. And so, what you have with modern slaves, which is what they are, is a lack of spirituality and understanding about real values. It doesn't necessarily change, though, with the streets and homeless people, though, the hierarchy of value and status based on things that are taught to us from the moment that we're born. We would actually have to be completely outside of social media. The grid would have to be down, and people would have to deal with face to face relationships to actually have to be unplugged, to be unplugged. So there's just these are all basically things that I'm going to continue to record because we're going to continue to see people living alternative lifestyles outside of the system, not because they're not capable, but because they're trying to save what's left of their soul. And there's a lot of people that I've known in this world that had a lot of soul to them in the 1980s and 1990s that seemed to really change their polarity after 911, not because of 911, but because of the changes the solar cycle brought. There were a lot of opportunities for people to continue to help build the system that is now enslaving us all throughout the last couple of years through many ways that I don't need to specify, but I can look at my friend Alan, who was kind of like a cool gangster in Portland back in the 70s and 80s, become a corporate gangster at a sports stadium where the Blazers played in the 2000s. And how what was really cool about him and like the Fonzie or like Bolo Young from Bloodsport, all that super masculine stuff became toxic all of a sudden when he's hanging out with military people, and he's rubbing elbows with people who think they're really cool because they're part of this post 911 belief system and ideology that sprouted up literally overnight. So go from like a cool guy straight out of a movie to a villain. And it was during that period that a person who I admired became basically the devil. So I'm able to look at most men, males as they are, as people that are nothing to me because there's nothing that I can see in them that's actually doing anything to report on anything. And so many of them on the internet are just going with, I'm basically out of energy. I'm going to hit pause now and just kind of do some deep breathing here and kind of end it here, you know.